Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. Today with me is Tony DiBenedetto, who is the CEO of Appspace, and we'll get to Appspace in a little bit. But first, Tony, can you tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing with employees being asked to return to the office and the kind of tensions and conflicts that's creating?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to have a good conversation. It's interesting times. I have said for years that we're in a kind of a employee revolution. I've been thinking that for 20 years. Obviously, COVID pulled the Band-Aid off and said, yep, there's a lot more power as an employee than an employer. And as a result, I think the concept of a mandate, and you're talking about the tension, is in some companies falling on deaf ears, right? Because a lot of times employees have choices, right? And when a CEO or board or anything comes out and says, hey, this has been working, but now we want to see you, we want you back in the office 3 days a week, 4 days a week, some of the mandates you're seeing from some of the largest companies. It's had really mixed results. I think the thing I'm hearing from other CEOs, just the surveys we do, is it's falling on somewhat deaf ears because we've now seen it can work a different way. I'm sure everybody has their own opinion on what work means or how it's working effectively, but I think there's a lot of tension, and I think it's putting pressure on the employer. It's not about what you say, it's also creating an environment where people want to come there. And we've been using the word destination, which sounds like a vacation thing. But think we spend a good percent of our lives working. We have choices as employees. And so I do think the concept of how can the employer make it a destination that the employee thinks, hey, it's to my benefit to go there because I'll be more productive, or I get to meet with my fellow employees. I think it's those types of things that are leading people to push back or to not be happy with it. So I think the tension exists. I know we just did a study, and I think it's about to get released. I'm sure we can send you a copy of a bunch of our customers about what's working, what's not working. And then the employees said there's 3 things the organizations need to improve on. Sharing updates, right? We need to know what's going on in this hybrid world, because now we're in the car, on our phones, on our laptops in the office, and you need to find me and tell me what's going on. 2, we need to connect with people now that are in different locations. So I'm at a coffee shop, you're in the office, somebody's at corporate, and we really need to communicate very seamlessly. And then you're going to collaborate in different ways, whether that's content or digital whiteboards or whatever. So those are the top 3 things we got back on our survey, which is a little bit of data. But this idea of collaborating differently is really a hot topic. And the mandate thing, I think it's going to fail. I know there's mixed thoughts on it, but I think there's so much power in the employee choice that I think the mandate without a destination and without a reason, right? The better, we talk to a lot of VPs of real estate, people that are in charge of communications, CIOs, and the smarter, the best companies in the world, they're asking us, like, what are the other companies doing? How are they making it interesting? What are they doing to their space or to the tools to make it easier for this hybrid world to work? I think those are the companies that 5 years from now, we're going to start talking about in a different way.
Now, one thing you didn't mention is productivity. And when I help 22 organizations transition to long-term hybrid work arrangements, and one of the big things that I talk to them about when they say, well, we want workers back in the office, is I ask why, and they say, well, we want to make sure that they're productive. And then we have a conversation about how you make sure they're productive. What do you see your customers, or maybe even within your company, what are the conversations like about productivity when workers work remotely versus when they work in the office?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's at the heart of what your bigger question was earlier. It really, I think it does partly depend on the kind of work you do. There's some work, I'll point out the obvious, like if you're a doctor, there's some things that the physicality of the work is super important. And I'm assuming most people understand the easy ones.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of ones that are gray. And I've talked to companies that design apparel and shoes, and they actually had quicker designs, shorter designs in a hybrid world than they did in a collaborative workspace for lots of different reasons. People were more productive during COVID, which they had a lot of reasons for it. So I honestly think it does depend on the work, but this shift that's going on of power, there's also a shift in kind of the generational look at things. And I'm older, I admit I'm older, but you have to adjust to kind of the realities of the times that we're in. And it's really not about activity. You don't have to see the work. If you're running a global company, you don't see the work anyway. It's happening all over the globe. Right. And yes, you have other people in those areas that you trust, but I think we have to evolve to this world where we trust the results and we have the right measures in place. So I think the companies that are well run, that know what productivity measures the outcomes need to accomplish, are much more comfortable. And where there's what I would call more progressive leadership, and they recognize this thing that I'm recognizing, which is we're not going backwards. So you might be able to dictate for another year or two, but it really, the generation of people that are 20 to 35 right now, they want you to trust them because they're trusting you. They want you to trust that they're doing the work because the results are there. And so I think the idea of measuring activity is probably pretty old school. And again, this comes from a person that is pretty old. But I do think there's a big shift to that. I think if you can't measure it and you have to see it, then I think you have to have a different conversation and say, this is why we're doing that. This is why we need to see you, not because we don't think you're productive, because of X, Y, or Z. And I think most employees will understand, or they'll work somewhere else, So I think the idea of seeing the work is really old in its thinking. And I think the CEOs that are more progressive understand this.
Yeah, and I found it interesting that Elon Musk was famously well known for wanting all of his employees to be visible and come to the factory floor. And then he, at Twitter as well, Tesla, Twitter, SpaceX. Then recently he closed the Singapore office, the Seattle office, other offices, and told all of his employees there to work remotely because, of course, he's doing some cost cutting. And it costs, of course, much less for a company to have employees work remotely than to have them work in the office. So I'm curious, what have you seen about the cost structure and how that's influencing conversations?
Yeah, for one, I mean, in so many ways, Elon Musk is a genius, but I think he's proven also he has some blind spots when it comes to interacting with people.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, he's obviously a genius, but I don't know that he reads the room well when it comes to these types of things. I do think from everything I've read, he's kind of missing this point, particularly in a tech company, where you don't really need to be in an office. A factory might be different if you're talking about people that are on the factory floor. I get that you may have to make adjustments to the robotics, et cetera. Anyway, well, there's a lot of interesting things going on, like the power in organizations. IT and HR were power areas, and real estate was not. And I think today, if you look at the balance sheet of companies, Gartner, I think, recently put something out that about 50% of the leases in the world are up in the next 12 to 18 months. Yeah. Well, I think there's a shift going on in organizations because there's a lot of money in those leases. And so what do we do? I think you are seeing companies do a couple of things. One, there's absolutely, as these leases come up, I do think there'll be reduction in leases across a number of industries. That's been happening for sure, but not at the pace. I think the pace will pick up. So the power in that cost savings, I think the smarter companies will take those cost savings and pump it into workplace experience things, making a destination for people, making the tools better to access data remotely, have an experience at your home that's better than what it was in the office before. I think you'll see stipends around tech at home. I'm seeing this on boards that I'm part of already. So I think that will happen. I also think what we're seeing in these major global companies is they're forming workplace experience teams or departments that bring together real estate, IT, and HR, so that when you think about the workplace experience, it is all of that, right? It's bringing that all together. And when I talk to my friends at Accenture, they're doing a lot of consulting in this area. And they're seeing that the better companies are putting those groups together and creating that destination that I was talking about earlier. And so I think there'll be money available to do what we're talking about with the reduction of the footprints. But I think you'll see the money go into workplace experience, again, in the better companies. Not everybody will do it. There's a lot of pressure with the current economy for public companies to produce results. So I do think some of it will go to that as well. But I think you'll see a shift. I also think you'll see a shift in configurations. I know I was talking to LinkedIn recently. They're a big customer of ours. They're doing a lot of things with collaborative space, obviously flexible walls, and all the just this recognition that people are not, they don't care as much about, do you have an office for me? They want to know that there's a space that can quickly be ready for me, but they also want to know there's lots of collaborative space. So there's a shift towards that individual space to hoteling, which has been going on for years, but also now a shift to a lot more collaborative space, and also an identification of the space in between. So maybe a lot of people work an hour, 2 hours from an office. And so they're like, I need to get out of the house because my house isn't perfect. And I want to collaborate. And so 5 of us are going to go meet at a coffee shop. 5 of us are going to go meet at a park. And we're still going to work, even though some people don't trust that. How can I create this work environment, this collaborative space now in this location that's not governed by IT, HR, and real estate? And so I think you'll see more and more of that happening as I'm listening to our customers, and we're adjusting our product to accommodate this idea of in between. It's not the office, it's not the home office. So I think you'll see a trend there. And again, the better companies will go, oh, that's a good thing, because they didn't drive 2 hours. That's a waste. And they weren't by themselves in the car in maybe a dangerous situation. They're actually at a place where they all decided to meet, because maybe in that sub community, 5 of those people already live and they only have to drive 15 minutes. And it's a coffee shop, a restaurant, it's whatever. And they've accommodated that. It'll be interesting to see if restaurants and coffee shops acknowledge this and start thinking about the monetization of space in their locations, not just about the coffee. It'll be interesting. I haven't thought about that till just now. So.
I know that already some are offering things like subscription options for restaurants that you can spend some time there. Or in England, there are pubs that offer packages for co-working for people who work there. In some apartments, there are co-working spaces being built in as part of new developments and renovations. So it's definitely happening.
Those are good examples.
To go back to the experience, I definitely, for the clients who I help transition, we definitely cutting down real estate and investing that into the home office of employees, because that makes them more comfortable and more productive. And of course, technology, home office, technology, and so on, to make them more comfortable, more productive, ergonomics, all of that sort of stuff. So definitely investment there, and from my experience as well. Now, tell me a little bit more about what Appspace does to facilitate these third spaces, and then more in general to facilitate collaboration.
Yeah, we have a platform that does everything from communicating to every device anywhere. So we put if a company has messaging of any type, we can put it on a digital sign, a kiosk, obviously your laptop, the phone, really kind of any device. And you have one message and we can get it proliferated out to your audience, wherever it is. So that's one thing that we do. 2 is, because we have a space reservation system, we are also helping people make sure there's space available for them, but also they can make sure it has the right catering in Europe in particular. That's a big part of space management. Even in the US to some degree, that's certainly an issue, and making sure that the right things are in the room, whether that's any kind of devices in the room. We are interacting with all kinds of sensors so that we can make sure it's the right environment, whether it's temperature or whether it's environmental readings that are important. You and I just recently talked about what happened in Ohio. Imagine that the sensors could read that this was a safe office. When we talk to HR people, one of their number one jobs is making sure employees are safe. part of that's workspace is safe, you know?
Sure.
And so we've interacted with all the sensor companies in the world so that we can give that information right there in the room. We also built into our application the concept of a modern intranet. So you may already have SharePoint or something else, and you have all these documents. Most of those things are gigantic. These large companies, and it's hard to find things. So we, in our employee app, allow for easy search, easy to find people, understand how to collaborate with people. Like our system proactively lets you know, hey, do you know 5 people from your department are coming into the office this week? Might be a good time to come in. We find that employees will come in if there's a reason, like, oh,
Sure.
there's a whole bunch of people for different reasons are in, and instead of it just being work, maybe we'll tag on a happy hour or a lunch and have a reason to build team. Because the one difficulty in remote working, pure remote working, is do we develop the relationships?
Sure.
And we can help facilitate that to just letting you know proactively that those people are there. So we have an easy to use tool that makes that whole journey easy, and we're constantly asking. We've got about 150 of the Fortune 500 for our customers, and they're always giving us lots of feedback. There's a lot of them are super innovative, like Nike and LinkedIn and those types of folks, and we listen and then start to incorporate those things into what we're doing.
Excellent. That's very helpful. And clearly, you have a lot of expertise in the space. Are there any last words with which you wish to leave our audience?
No, it's even though I'm a little bit older, I'm really excited about this empowerment that's happening. That our company right at the middle of what's going on, and your generation and my daughter's generation. I think I'm excited about the leadership that will come from that and the way that work will evolve. We'll have a user conference in September talking about the future of work. And I'm just excited about where it's going, and what the work you're doing. I read a number of your articles, and I love that you're pushing the envelope and making us aware of some of the challenges that are going on. So it's good for me to get to know you a little bit.
Excellent. It's good to get to know you too, as well, Tony. And thank you for coming. And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Make sure to leave a review wherever you check this out and subscribe to the show. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.